Hello and welcome back to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech and so much more into one place. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective. You already knew that. And joining me this week...
I'm Ronan McLaughlin, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective.
Hey Ronan, how is it?
I'm wondering what is the and more? If we bring all the world's best tech into one place, what's the and more?
Banter.
Ah, that's what I was hoping you'd say.
Yeah.
Like this? Is this banter? Does this qualify as banter?
This I don't think does yet qualify for banter, and if it did, it's not our best.
No, but we do have a big show, so it's probably best we don't get too far down that banter rabbit hole.
No. There is actually a gigantic show ahead, and I think it's the bike industry either not coordinating their product releases or coordinating them too much and just trying to outplay each other for attention. I don't know what's going on, but it's a busy month ahead. But this week alone, we've got the first update to Shimano XTR and their first time they've actually gone wireless. So first update in 7 years. First time Shimano has actually ever been fully wireless, all in one announcement. Plus a new take on brakes, plus new wheels from them, plus new pedals. I think there's some new shoes in there as well, which I haven't even bothered to get to. So there's a lot there. Campagnolo didn't want to be left out either. They've added a gear, gone wireless. Well, sticking with wireless with an extra gear. What else? Favero.
Mm-hmm.
They've stuck their hand up. And yeah, anyway, I think there's a lot to get through. And I guess it's worth noting that all of this comes off the back of Unbound, which was a flurry of fresh tech. So later on in the episode, you'll hear myself and our US editor, Josh Weinberg, jump on and we'll talk about all things tech at Unbound, including a bunch of unreleased bikes and some cool hacks that we saw being used by some of the top riders as well. We might even, do the thing everyone else does, which is talk about tire trends. But yeah, Ronan, where should we start?
Start with XTR, will we?
Sure.
Because you do have a mammoth review written on it, and you've also got another podcast on this channel.
Yes.
About the new XTR,
yes.
So maybe we'll get that one wrapped up.
Yeah, so XTR, I mean, it's honestly been a very long time coming. I remember being at the launch of the original XTR Di2 some 11 years ago. I remember Wade being at that launch as well for Cycling Tips. I was not there for Cycling Tips. Yeah, it's been a long time. A lot has changed in the bike world, and 11 years have passed since we last saw an XTR Di2 version be released. 7 years since the last updated old XTR, and so yeah, I think in my mind, I'm partly justified by completely blowing the word limit on my coverage of this new stuff and getting into the nitty gritty details. But yeah, I don't know. It's a big one. It's a big launch. So new 1x12 XTR Di2. It also spells the first time Shimano have gone wireless. So I think it's pretty interesting to anyone that is keen to see where Shimano may be headed next. Perhaps the big surprise is that they've stuck to using a derailleur hanger. I think there was enough rumors around that they'd be taking the SRAM UDH approach, and nope, they're just bolting onto the UDH that most frames now have. So
I don't know, had Shimano gone with some sort of full mount, that might have felt like some sort of copycat move, but in sticking with mounting to the UDH, which is obviously a SRAM invention, also kind of feels like a...
Yeah, or any hanger. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it truthfully, and the review covers this, so I'm not going to repeat it too much, but it feels like a nice group set, but that it's late. It doesn't feel like it's like the next... it's not a revolution for group sets or anything like that. I feel like it sort of slots in between, somewhere between, maybe SRAM's previous release and its current transmission in terms of how fresh it feels and what it brings to the market. Like, I think it is a really nice performing group set and does some things really well and will please some people in certain ways. But overall, it's perhaps not quite like the SRAM beta that people might have been waiting for.
Which, I mean, is very, very Shimano. Just, nothing, not exactly mind-bogglingly new.
Yes.
But works very well.
Refined. Yeah, they sort of have a history of, SRAM's the disruptor and Shimano sort of is the refiner. But I don't know, like both Alex Hunt, a tech writer out of London for us, and myself, we've spent some time on the group set. That's all covered in the review, and both of us kind of came away wondering, like, is it enough? And that's the sort of thing that I get into my review. So yeah, you'll find a true opinion on which would prefer over like a transmission or this, and even like whether, if you've got a mechanical shifting Shimano bike at the moment, say 12-speed mechanical, whether I'm recommending that it's worth the upgrade. But
the other thing that's
it's
sort
interesting
of
either way.
Not really being in these circles, what kind of surprised me was 1x12. I would have assumed that 13 was the logical speed to go there.
Yeah, I think they by keeping 1x12, they've kept a lot of backward compatibility with the last 7 years of drivetrains that they've got in the market. But yeah, again, it does feel like the industry is quickly moving to having that one extra. And so yeah, Shimano may or may not be on the back foot there. Yeah, I've heard some rumors, and I don't know how much I can trust these rumors, but it kind of sounds like this group set was really late and was potentially almost released as like, not as a gap fill, but more as like an answer to the last 7 years of bike sales. Like, it's now like an electronic answer to those people. There's a lot of bikes in the market. There's probably hundreds of thousands of bikes that these parts will work with, and who knows, maybe millions. And I think perhaps we haven't seen the big release of Shimano yet. Maybe that's still a year or two away, where the derailleur hanger does get ditched and we do get an extra cog, and I don't know, robots shift. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, there are robots there.
Speaking of group sets that feel a little late and maybe an interim solution, should we move on to Campag?
Yes. Before we do, I'm just going to give a shout out. There is a special episode of Geek Warning, which you'll find in the channel. It should have published yesterday or perhaps even the day before, with Nick Murdoch, who is the product manager for Shimano North America. And Shimano North America have increasingly been getting involved in, especially in the off-road scene, into the development side for Shimano International. So they have an increasing amount of sway over where the product goes, and Nick's at the, sort of spearheads that. So pretty interesting chatted for about an hour about, what's new in the drivetrain, choices, why it was so late, all the various other little intricacies, and also got into some of the things related to the brakes and wheels, and yeah, quite a nice candid chat. So head on over there if you're keen to hear more. But yeah, let's talk about what the Italians are up to.
So when I said outdated group set in an interim solution, what I was referring to was the wireless 12-speed launch that we've seen 2 years ago. Because it is only exactly 2 years since Campagnolo unveiled that Super Record 12, but they're back now with Super Record wireless 13-speed, 2x13 speed to be specific, for the road, also to be specific. And it is... Well, I've written this up for a news piece for the website. We haven't yet had laid eyes nor hands on the new group set. There were some talks with Campag about a return visit to Vicenza to get a feel for this new group set, but unfortunately that visit never materialized, or that invite never materialized. So we're working off what we have here in press releases and presentations and whatnot. But it does look like, as I've said in the article, it looks to me like what Super Record Wireless should have been 2 years ago. And it looks like a big step forward.
It looks like a big step forward. It's also, some elements I would say are a step backwards. Specifically, maybe shifter concepts.
Yeah, but step backwards in a good way. I think.
Yeah.
So the key changes are an additional sprocket, a redesigned shifter ergonomics, including a return for the thumb shifter. They're ditching the vertically oriented button stack that they had on the Super Record 12-speed wireless. A new derailleur architecture, new chain rings, of which there are 7 combination options, new cassettes, of which there are 4 combination options.
Which go wider than before.
Yeah, those are 1029, 1033, and 1132, 1136. And so you're getting an extra sprocket in the middle of wider range cassettes. The 3 cassettes that launched with Super Record 12 2 years ago were like 1025, 1027, and 1029, and then they added another one in, but they were not very intuitive cassette options for the time, and Campagnolo was kind of heavily leaning on the front chainring options. But anyway, yeah, those new cassettes that you have now, wider range with an extra sprocket, so theoretically you shouldn't be having any huge jumps, although there's like a 20 to a 23 gap, which I'm kind of interested to see how that jump feels on the road. That seems like the only thing standing out from these new cassette options. The other thing is the fact that they've reintroduced two cassettes starting with an 11 tooth sprocket, which I think will please a lot of people.
Yep.
And then finally, yeah, they've just kind of rethunk the entire ecosystem without getting
there's certainly like a lot of interesting things here. Like you mentioned a revised derailleur, like it's now a lot slimmer than before. I think it looks a little bit more industrial perhaps, but also nicer in my mind. They've rethought the placement of the front derailleur battery, revised that. Like it to me it's a surprising amount of change given we saw a wireless drivetrain just 2 years ago.
Yeah, and it's hard to know. And I've heard reports of this thing being in testing last summer. So that would have you ask, was this developed in the 1 year between Super Record 12 launch and last summer? Or is this something they were already working on before Super Record 12 and they sort of had to bring out that wireless version there and then because otherwise they were going to end up like 7 years without a new group set, which, yeah, XTR. But I can't figure out, would there have been more damage done by the Super Record 12 failure, in my opinion, or not having a new Super Record for an extra 2 years?
No, I think damage was done, if I'm being honest.
I think so also. Yep. I think damage was done, but again, not having felt nor ridden this group set yet, I'm going purely off what I'm seeing on a presentation and a press release. I think this group set could undo a lot of damage. Unfortunately, it'll probably only be Campagnolo fans who are one back. I don't think Campag are doing enough here to win Shimano or SRAM users. But yeah, for the Campagnolo fan, that is good news if it does prove to be true.
So there's a few things on my mind with this. The first is perhaps the most surprising thing that I saw in the press release was that while it feels like everything in this world is getting more expensive, Campagnolo have seemingly wound back the price. There's actually like a not insignificant price reduction.
17%
to the previous 12 speed. Yeah. So I mean that's big given everyone else is getting more expensive.
Well, the Super Record 12 wireless was somewhat extortionate. So a 17% price reduction, arguably doesn't even bring it back into the realms of where we would want a group set to be these days. But it is, yes, it is going to be less expensive.
Yeah, it's an admission that they missed the price point, right? And I think that they...
So the non-power meter version is priced at €4,300, $47.50 US dollars, £3,900 sterling. Unfortunately, I don't have Australian dollar pricing yet or Canadian dollar. All the other.
It's too big
dollars.
of a number for the internet to hold.
My word count didn't permit the extra numbers.
And it's now just Super Record. There's no other levels of it.
Well, there was a bit of a hint to, I'm going to say budget, but again, I don't know if that's the right word, but a lower tier option coming soon.
Sure.
Okay. There's also, at Unbound at the weekend, Mattia De Marchi was seen riding with a Super Record wireless 13 group set, 2x13. And he had said on a video with Velo something along the lines of, I like 1x, but for some reason I have to ride 2x for now, but maybe I go back to 1x soon, which either he's just going to go and get a 1x chainring and put it on the Campag group set, or more likely Campag have a 1x gravel specific version of this group set coming, because the rear derailleur he had on was very clearly different to this one and had like a clutch in it.
It had a clutch. Yeah. I think it's probably worth reminding everyone that Campagnolo were the first to 13 speed quite a few years ago at this point with Eccar on the gravel. So they've been 1x13 before anyone else really got there. Yeah, and they're all along there's been rumors that they're going to have an EPS version of that. And dare I say, it feels like Campagnolo may be doing a similar rollout to what we saw with SRAM and SRAM Red last year. SRAM Red did a 2x12 red axis release, and then like 6 weeks later or a few, 2 months later, can't even remember, they had the Explore 1x13 red, which kind of reused a lot of the technology, but applied it in very different ways and introduced like a 1x specific technology and obviously a new cassette with an extra cog and a new derailleur, but it reused like the brake calipers and the shifters and all that. I'm just going to go out and say I think that's where Campagnolo is headed.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, they've as our own Ian Trellor found out, they've effectively killed record. And so that would, if they're also hinting at a lower tier road group set, then presumably there's some update to Chorus coming. I mean, none of this is coming from Campag, but I think, with an introduction of a competitive Chorus group set, also targeting that sort of Ultegra price range, Force price range, and this could be a big launch, could be a big year for Campag, and it really feels like this is where we should have been 2 years ago, but at least we're here. At least we're here now. I think a lot of us feared something worse for Campag.
For sure. And definitely a case of better late than never. Yeah,
100%. I mean, it also, just to speak on those new shifters as well, the bodies have been completely redesigned. So the huge tower that you had at the front of the old shifters is gone. It's now much more sleek looking, a much smaller profile. It looks like it's got a longer reach built into it, as many of the shifters do these days. I've asked Campag to confirm that. They haven't replied yet, but we're recording very early in the morning here. And the just even the shifters the lever bodies and the shifters themselves look like a vast improvement. The derailleurs, I don't think they'll go down in history as Campag's most elegant or beautiful derailleurs ever, but again, they're an improvement on the Super Record wireless that we've seen 2 years ago. Especially the front derailleur, I can't really see much of a difference, but the rear derailleur is. There's someone in the press release about.
It looks to me like they fell from a very low branch out of the ugly tree, versus the previous generation, which fell from the top and got caught up in a bunch of branches on the way down.
To be fair, though, that new XTR that we discussed earlier, the rear derailleur for that is the first one that I've seen, and first derailleur I've seen from any brand in a long time that hasn't been an acquired taste. It just looks good, or looked good to me immediately. Whereas all the new
non-mountain biker complimenting a gigantic mountain bike derailleur, that's
it doesn't look gigantic, that's part of it. Whereas all the derailleurs we're seeing now, whether it be Dura-Ace or SRAM Red or whatever it might be, they all just look, they've got that like skeletal look to them that just isn't going to look as good as a Super Record RS 11 speed from 10 years ago.
Yeah, you got to put now that they're all wireless, the battery has to go somewhere, and
that's the price you pay.
Shimano miraculously put theirs inside the parallelogram, which makes for a pretty big parallelogram structure, but I have to say there's some cool elements there. So, all right, well, this one, along with Shimano, you'll find up on Escape. Well worth checking them out, see what's new. And I think in both examples, I think it's a case of more to come from both of these companies using the technology that we've covered here.
Yeah, I'm actually really hoping we get a review sample of this group set. The Super Record 12, I wanted a review to confirm experience that I had, which was not great. Whereas with this, they've excited me again. I just want to ride this because as a Campag fan, I think it's a good step, or it could be a good step.
Sweet. Yeah. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And I'm gonna say well done, Campag, on I guess listening to customers and all that. And you've clearly taken a lot of feedback on board with this latest stuff. Cool. All right. Well, let's speaking of taking feedback on board, let's talk about some new pedals that you just got your hands on. New Favero. What are they called?
Yeah, Favero they've officially unveiled their new Assioma Pro RS, which is an SPD SL compatible road power meter pedal.
Yep. So Shimano road cleats.
Yes, of which there are 2 genuine cleats included with the new pedals. Which
2 sets or just one left and one right?
One. Well, they're ambidextrous, is that the word?
Sure.
You can use them left or right.
Two whole cleats, one pair. All right.
1 + 1. cleats in the box.
Nice. So yeah, so I guess fundamentally this isn't a new power meter pedal because it's using the same spindle as the MX2 Pro that came out, the SPD pedal that I reviewed last year, which is since, I sort of went out, I think I went out on a limb and said this is the benchmark SPD power meter pedal. And I think others have confirmed as much. I think Ben Delaney as well comes to mind as someone that recently said that again. Yeah, I mean, mine have been largely problem-free except for the occasional squeaky seal that some grease has fixed.
Are you still using them?
I still use them, yeah. Yep.
Is it your everyday off-road pedal? Is it in use that much, or?
I, unlike you, tend not to swap pedals, so I will typically leave them on one bike and then go without power on another bike. So yeah, they're not getting used every ride. I'd say they tend to be put on the bike I'm testing at whatever given time. So yeah, they get more use out of it than any other pedal. But yeah, they've been solid.
But the question there, I guess, was like you're using them a lot and there's been no issues.
Yep. Other than that seal squeak.
I think that's key because what is new here is just the pedal body. Favero had the Assioma She Duo or Duo She, whatever it was called. Basically,
yep, which I reviewed. Yeah,
it was their original pedal pod or spindle pod power meter, which was compatible with a genuine Shimano pedal body, Ultegra pedal body, if I remember correctly, and
Ultegra and down. Yep,
Ultegra and down, and that had some. Yes, it brought SPDSL cleat compatibility, which is good for Shimano pedal users, but it had some compromises in that it had a greatly increased Q factor and stuff like that. Or stance width to be more specific.
Well, yeah, it made your road bike Q factor match a watt bike.
Which was one of my criticisms of the watt bike. Whereas this new SPDSL compatible pedal body from Assioma is their own pedal body. Perhaps it's an Expedo rebranded or something like that. But the end result is they've got a SPDSL compatible system rather than something you have to find a pedal body for. And so they've been able to eliminate that stance width issue. They've also introduced the MX2 spindle, which means that you get rid of that huge pod that came in the original Assiomas. And it's an overall much cleaner, much better, I'm going to say, and I mean better in terms of you don't have a stance width issue. You're not having to find a pedal body from another set of pedals to add to your Assiomas or whatever. You just out of the box, these are SPDSL compatible, and I have a set still in the box here because they arrived to me late last week. The embargo is tomorrow. I was not going to have opinions on them within a day or two of riding, and also doing a big ride next week. I was not for changing my pedals and cleats and all that, going to Shimano for the first time in years, a couple of days out from that event. So
you say that as if you're not going to change your cleat position while riding anyway.
I know that. I mean, someone asked me, someone told me you need to stick to the shoes that you use, and I was like, well, I change shoes 3-4 times a week, so I don't know which shoes that you mean.
you need to pack multiple shoes. I think it's worth noting why we've spoken about a pair of power meter pedals for so long in this episode is that Favero, I would say, for the last 6 years, maybe, ever since the original Assioma built around that look pedal body, I would say they've established themselves as the benchmark in the power meter pedal market. In terms of reliability, ease of use, trustworthiness of data, repeatability of data, and price. They do come in cheaper than their direct competitors. And so that's, I think, it's just worth explaining why we've spoken about these for so long, is that if you're in the market for power meter pedals, I think, given what these pedals are reusing in terms of the technology, I think it's probably going to be yet another win for the company as far as establishing themselves as the go-to.
And that's why I asked you about the MX Pro 2s that you're using, or MX2 Pro or whatever. It's like, this is the same internals, same spindle, same power meter. And yours have stood up to a year and a half of use so far without issue. You're saying mostly without issue, apart from a bit of squeaking.
Largely,
and so
yeah.
the question here is like, how good is this SPDSL compatible pedal body? That's what I'll be mostly looking to answer.
Yeah, the fact they're giving you real Shimano cleats is promising and quite cool. I think that's a nice touch. But yeah, anyway, Ronan will have a review in future. I suspect friends of the podcast like DC Rainmaker, I would imagine will have a review up soon. Maybe
yeah,
also,
I'd imagine they'd have
Llama.
had more time on them and perhaps have a review up already. Worth checking out.
Yep. So, but anyway, one to watch out. And yeah, I think it's obviously we haven't mentioned Garmin to this point, but obviously this is following a very familiar path to what Garmin did with its rally pedals, where it's a single spindle and you can swap bodies in and out. And that's what Favero have done here. So you could get your mountain bike pedals and swap in these new SPDSL pedal bodies.
That's the other thing we haven't mentioned is, yes, we've kind of indirectly said it, but you can just take the MX2 pedal body, the off-road option, and put it on the spindle for these new SPDSL compatible pedals, or vice versa. So you can have one spindle, buy an extra pedal body, which Favero sell for something like €45 or something. It's relatively affordable again.
Cheap.
And you have a power meter on both disciplines or multiple disciplines.
I would say it's not the sort of task I would be. Oh, it's actually not too bad. It's pretty quick. It's a couple. I think it's from memory. It's 2 bolts.
It's pretty quick. My concern would be like if you do it over and over and over again, multiple times per week or something. Do you add in some wear that then affects things?
There's always potential for damage or wear in these small bolts. So yeah, I mean it's not the sort of thing I'd be recommending to do weekly. But say like you hung up your off-road pedals for the winter. And then came back to them during the summer, or vice versa. Yeah, I think there's probably an application there that makes sense. So, say you're Marion Voss and you spend 9 months of the year on road pedals, and then 3 months of the year you start to get used to your SPDs again for cyclocross season. Then in that scenario, it would make perfect sense.
Or if you're Lachlan Morton, you could just skip the new SPDSL pedals and just ride the MX2's road, gravel, mountain bike, whatever. He doesn't use Favero's, but the point is he uses off-road pedals on the road.
In your sandals. Anyway, let's move on. There is more fresh tech to talk about at the toward the end of this episode, where we get into some of the gravel stuff that's been seen over the last week. But let's jump over to a PSA now. All right, Ronan, this one came from Escape member Paul Aubrey, who's somewhat local to me, and he wanted to share the story that's not to ignore your eye safety. He ended up with, this sounds very uncomfortable, he ended up with some of the Silka's chain stripper in his eyes. Apparently not while using it, just while carrying it, and it splashed up. And yeah, he ended up having to go to emergency and have his eyes flushed out. But yeah, I think there's probably a few lessons here. But the main one is, I guess, remember your eyes, and if you're ever working around hazardous materials or with things that are under pressure or things that can spring out, it's probably a good idea just to pop on some safety specs and enjoy the security.
We all wear gloves, or at least we should wear gloves when doing like a dot fluid brake bleed.
Yep.
Yeah, glass is probably a good idea as well. Like that stuff can, little hose, just if you hose snaps or something, and not that it snaps.
Yep, has happened to me.
But if it snaps back from you holding it or something, that stuff can skate everywhere. So
for sure, yeah, like bleed. You're no matter how good your bleed procedure can be. I mean, yeah, like the bleed kit can fail and cause, while you're while you've got it under pressure, it can pop out. Unfortunately, speaking from experience, you can also end up with suspension fork oil sitting above an air spring that you haven't released all the air out of. And not only does your ceiling get covered in fork oil, your hair and eyes do too. So yeah, I think I've learned this lesson a few too many times myself, but yeah, I think it's worth just anytime you're dealing with something that could go wrong, could lead to something springing up, may as well just put on some safety specs and having been through this recently, there's some cool ones around. There's some sort of nice quality, casual looking specs. So if the ones you've got are a bit dinged up and are a bit lacking in clarity, yeah, for not a lot of money, $30-$40, go to your local hardware store or local like industrial tool supplier, and you'll probably find some that are aimed at like tradesmen that are used to wearing things all day long. So Ronan's come back looking a bit like a stormtrooper, showing me his full face shield.
This is my strummer face shield, but I'm starting to wonder if I should be using it for bike maintenance. I mean, probably quite a few of us also have like old, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like if you had like even an old pair of cycling sunglasses that are all scratched and beaten up or whatever, like throwing those over your eyes is probably a lot better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, anything that covers your eyes, but I think clarity's good. I mean, I did repurpose an old pair of radars for the workshop. I bought some clear lenses for them, and I have those, but I've since replaced them again with something with more coverage. But yeah, I think fundamentally put safety specs on, and also I guess have a plan for if things go wrong and you do end up with something in your eye, like have a plan of how to perhaps flush it without needing to go to emergency. Paul, who gave this tip, he said once he was out of emergency, he realized that the tap in his sink has like a stretchy hose that comes out of the faucet, and that would have done the job just as well as what the hospital had. So yeah, I guess think it through where in your environment, whether you're working from home or out of a shop, and whether you've got something that would allow you to flush an eye out, garden hose or anything with clean water. So, but yeah, I think it's good PSA.
Just fall on the floor, roll around, screaming, "Help! Help!
My eyes! My eyes!"
Help!
Yeah. So, yeah, one to keep in mind. It has inspired me. I'll probably do a threaded in the near time about general workshop safety and first aid. Perhaps not the most fun topic, but a good one. So yeah, keep your eyes safe. Ronan, it's almost time for me to jump over to a chat with Josh about Unbound, but I know there's been something on your mind, and it's all related to you doing a ridiculous trip in a week's time with very little preparation. So do you want to tell us what the trip is, or is that not ready for sharing yet?
I suppose I probably can. It's been on and off and on and off and on and off all year, and at the moment it is on. It's also on supported, and it's a circumnavigation of the island of Ireland. For a while there, it was going to be just the West Coast as part of the Transatlantic Way bikepacking event. There's been some changes to the course enforced on the organisers there, and so I've sort of reverted back to my original plan. But anyway, yeah, we don't need...
What's the distance?
3,100 kilometers.
And is there a charity involved that was originally...
Yeah, I'm doing it. So I'm throughout the ride, I'm going to avoid peanuts, tree nuts, sesame, and lentils, the food allergens that my daughter has. And so I'll be raising awareness and funds for the food allergy community and a food allergy charity. Just trying to maybe convey some of the challenges that community faces on a daily basis. So
yeah,
as if it wasn't hard enough, and as if it wasn't the biggest bike ride that I've ever done for 8 days in a row, yeah, I'm going to be just adding in that extra challenge to make it a bit, to make it actually
so worthwhile. That sort of like when you look at any product, and even though there's no nuts in it, says may contain traces of nuts, you're avoiding that product.
Yes, anything that has
so you're
those
just gonna
ingredients
have
or may contain
filtered water.
Actually, our daughter obviously has these allergens, and so it's kind of normal for us. And I was chatting to Kevin Benkenstein yesterday, getting some advice and tips from seasoned bikepacking
contributor to Escape.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was sort of pointing out, like, with your first kid, it's normal, and so you don't know any different. Which, yeah, so and for us, it is kind of like checking every label of everything she ever eats is normal. It is going to be definitely a considerable extra challenge, but I think it's one that makes the whole thing worthwhile.
All right, Aaron. So yeah, good cause, massive event. You're still doing crazy things with a week out. Well, I'm going to say crazy things. You're just going to say this is perfect. This is just regular Ronan.
I feel like this has been overly prepared. This is not the day before, and so yeah, I'm feeling
okay. You're still a week out.
Yeah,
you could still change your bike at this point. One of the things on your mind sort of raised an eyebrow out of me, which is you've got obviously a lot of things that need powering off a USB bank. You also want to put a fairing on the bike, and somehow you're combining these things into something else that's trending?
You may call it a fairing. I call it a power bank storage unit. And so it is
an aerodynamically shaped.
You may say that. I don't think an aerodynamic shaped fairing would be in the spirit of bike packing. So again, yeah, it's just a power bank shaped power bank storage unit that sits on the head tube of a bike that may or may not have appeared on an Everesting bike a few years ago. Very similar idea, but yeah. Anyway, we're drawing this one out a bit too long. Basically, what I have to do is carry a power bank to charge my various batteries throughout the ride. The one I have is 450 grams. It's sort of rectangular shaped. It looks like quite a few of them. And I had been, listeners to Spin Cycle back at the Classics ahead of Paris-Roubaix would have heard me question whether a mass damper might have been something that would be of use for Paris-Roubaix, and if that would be something we might see in future. And I've been wondering if I have to carry this 450 gram power bank inside this fairing, which is like perfectly shaped for it, could I suspend it in such a way that it might act as a mass damper? And it's unclear whether or not I can. I think the answer is
it's amazing.
Potentially, but would take a lot of tuning, which I'm not quite sure if I have the expertise to do so. Well, I know I don't, but depending on the experts I ask, it is either entirely possible or it's not.
Okay.
I spoke to Pete Torque. Some people might know him from YouTube, and he ran some numbers and he reckoned that I would need a 16,000 Newton meter spring. And then he added some context to that and said that a car spring is typically around 15,000 Newton meters.
Okay.
And so that then
seems like a lot.
Yeah. But I spoke to other people who said it doesn't require that much. So ChatGPT just said I needed a medium stiffness spring, which
thanks ChatGPT, always useful.
Medium stiffness, yeah. But
sweet. Okay. Oh well, I'm sure we will hear how this journey goes, whether it involves a mass damper or not.
Yeah.
But
the thing that has inspired me here is that there are now tuned mass dampers coming into downhill mountain biking.
Yes.
Countercycle.
Yeah, pretty much everyone in downhill's playing with them.
Yeah, yeah. And so, they're perhaps not using 450 grams of mass. I don't think they are, but presumably also not using something stiffer than a car spring. So yeah, I know quite a lot of work went into developing that countercycle one, and I'm not thinking I can do that in a week. And not thinking I can do that ever, but yeah, could I develop something that might, or worst case scenario, do I just have my power bank sitting on springs? Which, is there a problem with that? These are all questions for the audience, by the way, in case you hadn't.
Probably nice for the power bank. But yeah, there you go. Tell Ronan what to do. A week out, what do you want him to do with his power bank? Child safe, please. Well, Ronan, I think it's safe to say we probably won't hear you on the podcast next week if everything is going to plan as far as your big lap of island.
I picked a small island, but it's not the smallest.
Yeah,
island. It's still pretty big.
Didn't go full Lachlan Morton. Yeah, still 3,000 plus kilometers.
It wasn't. It wasn't even Lachlan Morton that inspired this, because when Lachlan did it, you kind of like, oh, it's Lachlan. You don't think about doing things he does.
Yeah, sure.
But
yeah, it doesn't count.
And I don't mean it even in that way, but like Molly Weaver is also doing a circumnavigation of Britain, which is more than twice the distance I'm planning in the next week or two. She's attempting the world record for around Britain. She's actually spoke about that on Freewheeling podcast earlier this year. Johnny's been talking to her as well. And, very much not at all the case of seeing her doing it and thinking, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. It was more a case of she announced her attempt at that, and I was like, oh, circumnavigations are a thing. They're an option. They're a thing. They're not just something that Lachlan did, which is obvious, but it hadn't really hit me until then. So yeah, it's been through various iterations since, but I think we've landed on a route and all sorts.
Nice. All right. Well, good luck. And if for people that, is there any dot watching or anything like that happening?
I will have a tracker. We'll have a link to that and all as well. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Good luck. Hope it goes well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's not the end of the episode. We've got now to talk about some Unbound gravel, and then we'll finish up with an Ask a Wrench for members. So let's head on over to my chat with Josh Weinberg, who was on the ground, barely sleeping throughout the whole Unbound weekend. Josh Weinberg, welcome back to Geek Warning. How are you doing?
Thanks, Dave. Doing good. A little bit tired after a big week in Kansas at Unbound last week, but got some good sleep last night, so back with it today.
Nice. That's, a long week without sleep. If the amount of work that you're producing is anything to go by.
Yeah, I mean it was limited. And the first couple of days it was a lot of tracking down interesting bikes and photographing them and writing about them, and then we quickly got into the start of the XL distance race, which interestingly, they started at 3 p.m, so it quickly turns into night, and we followed it right from the start, up until, kind of about an hour past dark. And, so that was a late night. And then the 200 race starts, at like 6 a.m. the next day. So I had like a 4 a.m. alarm that day. And so I think I got like 2.5 or 3 hours of sleep that night, but it was, perfect. Yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of in that mode, the racers and the, media and photographers alike. So, it's just kind of like that. We're all kind of in that same headspace. So it seems to work for whatever reason.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, yeah, Unbound, it's, while there are official Gravel World Championships, disputed title that, I think there's a couple events claiming to be that, but Unbound is really the, I think amongst the riders, probably the most unofficial World Champs event in the gravel scene. It's become quite big, and with that, I think brands have increasingly used it to either showcase new product or like put new product into the race and then pretend like there's nothing to see, cover it in yellow stickers and then just not talk about it. So so I mean, with that, like I think you saw and you captured and you've covered on Escape quite a few new bikes. I mean, I guess let's talk about some of them that, I guess all of these are unreleased, and I don't think we even know names of them, but right. What's sort of like some of the bikes that you saw that
I think like the most visually noticeable ones were the Specialized Diverge, really bold red with the yellow graphics, referencing their an older mountain bike model. But like, I saw them like being unloaded from vans like multiple times throughout the week, and I didn't know that was one that was definitely not on my radar going into the race week. So it's like just getting there and seeing all these, very obvious new Specialized bikes being unloaded, and a lot of the athletes, being asked to ride them in the race, and I don't think a lot of them had spent much time on them previously. So that's kind of like another interesting aspect of it all, is like, riding new gear that you haven't really spent much time with. But I'm sure they're used to that at that level.
Yeah, so I mean that Diverge, it kind of looks a little bit like the existing Diverge in that there's the Future Shock in the front end, the little suspension that sits beneath the stem and above the head tube, so sort of isolating the rider from the forces rather than isolating the wheel. Looks like they've greatly increased tire clearance. I mean, is there anything else that you saw in that bike that is noteworthy?
And then the other big one was, I think they added an additional mount on the fork, and then just UDH compatibility was like the like kind of bringing it up to current, but yeah, kind of like light rolling updates, maybe you could call it. But I guess not that light. I mean, a few of those things are pretty substantial, especially like increasing tire clearance to join the ranks of many other brands these days and wanting to fit bigger tires.
Yeah. Did it look like it had room for mountain bike tires?
Yeah, I think so. I think Lael had 50s on there, and there was plenty of room on the bike that that I shot of hers. I didn't really see any other racers with much bigger in there. And then that was like kind of, I guess, another trend is that because of the conditions, I think, some folks were running mountain bike tires, but I think predominantly, we saw 45s and 50s in the actual race, which was kind of interesting and maybe somewhat unexpected.
Yeah, I think out of fears of like mud buildup, probably like just a mud clearance, just keep rolling without your wheel getting blocked in the frame.
Yeah.
So I think that was the common reason for that. But all right, so yeah, we've got Specialized. What else is on the list?
Yeah, and then there was a Pinarello that I also got to photograph. That one was grouped into we had one article that was a grouping of bike checks. And that was Excel Dubose. Pinarello, there's not a name for it yet, as far as I know. I just kind of referred to it as a gravel or all-road bike. And I threw the all-road tag on there just because of some of the features that it has. Like there's some pretty obvious rack mounts, fender mounts, and potentially even a rack mount. I'm not quite sure on that, though. Some mounts for like bolt-on frame bags, fork mounts, kind of all those features you might want in an all-road bike, but it certainly looks like a little bit more of an aggressive, Pinarello race bike,
like road leaning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Race.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why this just came to me, but I mean, you said you don't know what it's called, but like Pinarello have like the gravel naming and the dogma naming, and for some reason I'm thinking that like an Australian inspired spirit of gravel name called the Grogma might be a good option for them.
That really just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah, new bikes coming from Specialized, Pinarello. There's two more brands on the list.
Yep.
What else?
So then there's the two from Factor. So they had two, and those were a little bit easier to talk about. The brand manager and owner were there with their own kind of personal builds that they were actually going to race in the 200. When I talked to them, I didn't actually check to see how they fared in that race, but they were definitely preparing for it the day before. And one of them is a suspension corrected kind of, call it monster gravel race bike, if you will. Can clear a big mountain bike tire, but it still has Factor's. It looks like their pedigree of a bit more aggressive handling bike, but kind of unique in that it is suspension corrected with a big tire and can still fit apparently a 52 tooth chainring. So has a bit of everything there. So I think that bike is going to be pretty interesting for them.
Yeah, it looks like it kind of in stance. It looks a bit like I've got Factor's Lando hardtail in my collection.
Okay.
And it looks like in its stance and sort of in its aesthetic, it sort of looks a little bit like that. But obviously, it's like it's not suspension corrected around a mountain bike fork. It's gravel suspension corrected, which is lower. So, I think that's a interesting bike. But yeah, the tire clearance on that did look big.
Definitely big, and I'm really interested to see what the seat angle ends up being, because it's so hard to tell on some of these bikes that, have a curved seat tube that wraps around the rear wheel to provide more of that tire clearance.
Yep. Yeah, the effective seat angle will be
it looks pretty slack, and if it is, I don't know. I'm interested to see what that number actually ends up being on paper.
The Lauf Siegler, I think, was the first big tired gravel bike that also did something similar with the seat tube angle, where it got quite slack in order to weave itself around the wheel. But I don't know. This one doesn't look quite as extreme as that, but it's time will tell, I guess.
It definitely is. And then you compare it to the other bike that they had there. That's a bit more of a, traditional looking, it looks like an all-road bike with big, big tire clearance. This is kind of I guess it'll be slotted in between the current Ostro gravel, as far as like that will be their dedicated like race bike. And then they'll have the suspension corrected I call it an adventure bike or monster gravel bike.
Yeah.
And then this other one will be kind of in the middle of those two with pretty big tire clearance up to, I think, about a 48. So close to a 50. And, but there's still they kept a front derailleur mount on there. So you can have a lot of options and how you build it up.
Yeah.
All of these come with factors, integrated cockpits. And then the other interesting thing about these is it does have just a traditional 27.2 round, non-integrated seat post clamp. So you can run kind of whatever seat post you want, dropper or rigid.
Nice detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, that second factor you're talking about with the clearance of like 47s on the back or 48s on the back, that I suspect is probably the replacement for the Factor LS, which is sort of started. I think it was Factor's first gravel bike. It was one I reviewed, and it basically just felt like a road bike that you could, like, if you tried hard enough, you could squeeze a narrow gravel tire into, but it still remained like a road bike feel and had, like significant toe overlap. Rode nicely, but definitely like a very, very, very sharp tool with by today's standards, very limited tire clearance. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's like the new version of that. And yeah, can fit a big gravel tire, but realistically it's probably just like a modern all-road bike and in how most people would end up using it. So,
which I think is what, the bike that a lot of people actually need or want when it comes to kind of a versatile gravel bike that you could even put, a nice big road tire on for certain situations if you, if you wanted to, which again is what I feel like a lot of people are wanting to do these days. Yeah. So I think that'll be a pretty popular option from Factor.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, Orbea also had a bike in that sort of design idea. So what was that?
Yeah, this one's super interesting to me. Again, I don't know what the name of it is. It might be an update to the Terra, or they might be doing something completely different. I actually saw this was this one that we have in an article on the site is, I believe, one of two that were spotted at Unbound. I didn't catch the other one. I think they're each like a bit different, and I can't really tell you what the differences are, but maybe they're doing a sort of a completely new model or completely revamping the Terra line. Like I'm just not sure. That's total speculation, but it does seem like they're kind of I guess literally doubling down on their gravel race bikes. But this one has some interesting aspects to it. Notably like the fork and the down tube seem to possibly be shaped in a way to provide some aero advantages. Like the fork blades have kind of these little wings on them almost that go fore and aft directionally. And then the down tube has an interesting shape to it. It kind of gets bigger. It kind of widens out as it goes down towards the bottom bracket for a storage compartment that looks quite large. I didn't touch it because, the athlete who had this bike wasn't really supposed to talk about it too much. So I kind of respected that. But but then the down tube is kind of shaped in a way that looks like it could pass air pretty easily, along it, like from the fork back. So seemingly has some aero aspects in mind, but again,
okay.
I don't know what are your thoughts when you look at that bike?
Yeah, it looks like a aero inspired gravel bike to me. So yeah, I don't know. Looks like a race gravel bike, and I think if what we're seeing in the market is more and more. I think we're seeing gravel split into adventure and then sort of race bikes, and I think the race bikes more brands are going down the path of aerodynamic elements. And speaking of like aero inspired gravel bikes, I mean, one that we saw over the same weekend as Unbound, which happened elsewhere over in Europe, was Marion Vos, the GOAT. She ended up soloing to a win as part of the UCI Gravel World Series in an event there in the Eifel region. And the bike she was on there was what looks to be like a new Cervelo aero gravel bike. I mean, likely the new like Asparo 5, because Cervelo updated the Asparo last year, and there hasn't been an update to the more premium, more expensive, historically more racy Asparo 5. But yeah, certainly seems like a theme against if Unbound and that race is anything to go by.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to see if riders really are that segmented, if there's like really just a full on race segment and then that kind of more like recreational or adventure segment.
Yeah, I find it quite an interesting topic, and I think this is probably one for a future dedicated episode. But like, it's something I've been discussing with contributor Kevin Bakenstein a bit. In that there's a very clear divide at the moment in gravel bike design between, like we just mentioned it as like aero gravel and like adventure gravel. I think you could also call it Euro gravel and American gravel racing.
Yeah.
And I think like, the American gravel racing scene is like pushing towards like mountain bike tires and suspension corrected stuff and on bike storage, long events. And Euro gravel, like where the UCI has taken the sport, is like it's mandated that there's no single track, courses can only be so technical. There has to be a certain amount of road in the event, and that's sort of where we're seeing like this, the use of narrow tires and aero still being like very very important to that market. So anyway, I just find it interesting that like these like two very different takes on the sport are causing like this split in the products we see.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, and something that I'm seeing too, and we certainly saw that variety at Unbound. But it's interesting because you look at like what some of like the top 10 or 20 finishers are riding, and you have that whole spectrum featured there. So I think it just comes down to what kind of race you're riding and how well prepared you are, and a little bit of luck too. Yeah.
I love the tech of like something like Unbound. There's just so much nuance in it, and like hearing the riders wanting talking about tire selection up to the very last night.
Oh yeah,
about what they're going to run based on course conditions and how much that varied their decision. As we mentioned, like them deciding to go narrower. But yeah, even just like something like in the men's 200 event, I think first and second finishers ran the same tires as each other, but they had them in the opposite directions, if that makes sense. So like, so the winner, Cameron Jones, I think he ran Schwalbe tires, I believe like the new G1 Pro line stuff. But yeah, 50 mil on the front, 45 on the rear, I believe. But he had the slick treaded version on the front wheel,
right, and
a knobbier tire on the rear wheel. Whereas Simon Pullen, who finished behind him, I believe was running the same Schwalbe tires. But yeah, he had the slick tire on the rear, which is sort of the more commonly seen thing, and the knobbier tire on the front. So just interesting, like just to see these little things where even the same equipment's being used in different ways and still being ridden to success. So I don't know, just I geek out on those little things. So
yeah. Speaking of these two, it was kind of cool. We were watching the live stream as we were tracking them going from location to location to, we were kind of trying to stick with the lead group most of the time to photograph what was going on. And there was one point in a live stream where Pullen, like after an aid station, pulled out like a little bottle of chain lube and was like lubing Cam's chain, and like it's just really kind of what other sport do you see that in? Like that was just so interesting. And maybe it was like, I think even Payson who was announcing, like speculated that maybe it was like the sound of Cam's chain was like bothersome.
Was driving him nuts.
Yeah, and so he lubed it up for that reason, or maybe he just noticed that it was like super loud and creaky, so did him a solid on that. But I thought that was pretty fun to see.
Yeah. Spirited gravel is mostly gone, but still little elements still shine through.
Yeah. So. And then seeing these two come through, well, the whole lead group, this is maybe a tangent, or it is a tangent, but it's kind of cool. The elite race like merges with the kind of everyone's race, both the 200-mile distance and the 100-mile distance. So at the last like 40 miles or so, you've got these like elite racers coming through when, you've got kind of everybody else out there just riding their race at whatever pace they're going. And so it's kind of chaotic, and like the lead moto will come through and kind of announce that the fast guys are coming, and to, kind of, grab folks' attention. But I saw a couple times where like the lead rider would kind of pat one of these other racers on the back and be like, "Hey, I don't know, like maybe you have your headphones in, but you got to get out of the way. Like we're coming through." Wow. So it's like definitely another like really interesting aspect of a race like this that you just don't really get anywhere else.
No. Yeah. I mean, that's, probably stressful for everyone involved as well, but, yeah, awesome. All right, well, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest stuff that we saw. I think the other fun little detail was something we first covered in Keegan Swenson's bike check that was on site the night before the race, was that he had two valves and one opposite each other, one opposite the other. And speaking with some mechanics on the ground, it's sounds like Keegan's teammate Tobin got trigger happy with a drill the night before the race, or a couple of days before the race. How unrehearsed was this?
Yeah, I mean that's what I heard, that they drilled an additional hole in his reserve wheel, and one of the holes had a tubeless valve and the other one had the valve of a tube. Yeah, if he got a flat that wasn't sealing with sealant or a plug, he could quickly inflate that tube that was already ready to go. And at least that was the theory. I do not know if he was able to successfully do that. That is something that, I mean, I didn't hear it, so I'm guessing that it didn't happen, but I cannot say that for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting approach, but yeah, I think when I was thinking about it, I mean, it's been done before. A tube inside a tubeless was something that a few downhillers did, maybe in the mid 2000s, before tubeless got really secure, and kind of even before inserts came into the market, like sort of around the similar time frame to like Schwalb's Procore technology, which was like a much smaller inner tube designed to keep the bead in place. It was like a little inflatable inner tube that sat in the tire that was also dual valve. But yeah, I know a few riders would have run inner tubes inside their tubeless tires to like prevent tire burping, and in the event that you did pinch flat the inner tube, then basically the air just escapes into the tubeless system at that point. So it has been done before, but yeah, Keegan's system, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't actually inflating that inner tube. It was very much just like a spare inside that he could inflate if he needed to. But yeah, I think that it was rife with issues, which is like, if you got a big enough puncture that the tubeless sealant wasn't sealing, then you, in theory, would need to patch that tire from the inside to stop the new tube from poking out of it. So he'd still have to, in theory, pull apart the system he's set up. My other issue with it was, in my mind, was that it would inhibit the flow of the tire sealant. So say you got a sidewall slash, I think that tube would sort of block the sealant from flowing in freely into seal, where the air was escaping from. But anyway, it's interesting. It's fun to see.
Yeah, and just another little tangent. Speaking of tubes in tires, I definitely saw way more than one tube bulging out of a gash in a tire at the end of the race. Like there were plenty of people who had to tube up and like sticking out of their tire. It was pretty wild to see. Yeah,
that's cool. That's so cool. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, Josh. For people that want to know more, I'd say head to Escape and find yourself on one of your many articles.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Cool. All right. Well, I think it's time to get to Ask a Wrench. I'm going to be catching up with Zach Edwards of Boulder Gruppetto. Yeah, this week we've got questions related to removing the impossible crankset, a crankset that just will not come off. How to adjust eccentric bottom brackets for those single speeders out there. We've got a question related to our favorite hand cleaners for once you're a little bit grubby. And there's a tip from a member about how to find dropped items on the floor. Plenty to discuss, but of course you will need to be a member in order to hear it all. So if you're not already a member of Escape Collective, then head to escapecollective.com/join. You can become a member, support what we do, support this podcast, and then in turn get access to everything that we do with this podcast and everything else on Escape Collective. That's it for the free episode. Until next week. Cheers.
This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Will Jones at Red Bricks Media.